non-profit group is worried that the odds may be stacked against South Africa in its bid to extradite the Gupta brothers from Dubai. It says prosecutors scale up efforts to bring the alleged state capture kingpins back into the country to face justice. We're joined now by Open Secrets Director Henny van Vieren, who's written about his doubts over the extradition process. Henny, good evening to you. Thanks for your time tonight. The Justice Minister on the show last week was very adamant that, things would be followed to the book, and as far as he's concerned, they would do their best to ensure that the Guptas are brought back into the country. There is a question of transparency, though. We don't know an awful lot about these conversations that are taking place between our officials and those in Dubai.
Evening, Kathy. Indeed, I think it's a question of transparency and to be fair, also to judge our law enforcement agencies and our criminal justice system on its performance in terms of the arrest that led to the arrest of the Guptas. And Kathy, I think one of the glaring things that stands out is that red notice that was issued for the arrest of the Guptas was issued by the outgoing head of the investigative directorate at the National Prosecuting Authority, Herman Cronje, on the last day of February. From what we understand, on the 1st of March this year, the Dubai authorities, who are not usually very energetic when it comes to extradition, and we can maybe come to what drives their motives, but they wrote to our authorities saying they needed further information. It took a full 81 days, Kathy, through till 21 May, for the police, from what we understand, to finally respond. We would imagine that the head of the National Prosecuting Authority, the Minister of Justice, and others would have been aware of this pretty lackadaisical response from the side of the police, not actually providing their counterparts with the information. And if they hadn't have responded by when they did, I don't think we would have seen the Guptas arrested at all. So if anything, we have a track record that's pretty abysmal when it comes to our appetite to treat this matter with the extreme seriousness that it deserves, given that these are, after all, some of the architects of state capture, and we know that they have profited to the tune of approximately 16 billion rand of stolen monies from the people of South Africa through the processes of state capture.
Henny, do you think this speaks to at all the issue of stability and in terms of leadership at these institutions? Because ultimately, when there is a lot of movements at a top level, it does mean that where things should have gone seamlessly and, where maybe Herman Cronje would have ensured that there was a quicker response, at that time there would have been a lull where the directorate was without a head.
Well, in fact, Kathy, there was a new head, which is, from what we know, is Andrea Johnson. She's an experienced prosecutor, and she's paid a salary, as is Advocate Shamila Batoy and the leadership team of the National Prosecuting Authority. So the exit of one person shouldn't destabilize an institution. I think the argument and the concern that we have, the argument we're making, is that there's the very real risk that the leadership of the National Prosecuting Authority and the heads of the other criminal justice agencies simply aren't taking this matter very seriously. Use another example, Kathy. When lawyers were now sent to the United Arab Emirates by the NPA to, in fact, ensure that no bail is granted to the Guptas, we would hope, and then that they are returned to South Africa through an extradition process. I mean, we'd argue that it's very much the B team that's been sent there. So it's an experienced advocate Anton Katz, who's a senior counsel who's been sent, but who has not spent any time on tackling the issues and the intricacies of the money flows involved in state capture. There are a whole range of senior advocates who have been working on those issues, have appeared at the Zondo Commission, who have been involved in investigations, working close to the NPA. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that of all the choices the NPA could make, that this is where it would finally land. And I guess, again, we're making the argument that one does get a sense that this is not a top priority issue for the leadership of the NPA. Now, the reasons for that I can't quite explain, but ultimately these individuals are accountable to the South African people, particularly through Parliament, and I think our parliamentarians need to be asking hard questions of the leadership of the NPA. If the Guptas slip through their fingers, Kathy, I think it's very clear that particularly the NPA would have failed the people of South Africa, and I think there's very good reason for us to call, or that they themselves should offer their resignation to the South African people at that point.
Henny, unfortunately, I'm not going to let you off so easy in terms of why it is you believe that the NPA is not dealing with this matter as being top priority, because when I look at the examples that you've given, you're ultimately saying that how it has been handled has been intentional, and the issue here is that the promises that the NPA has been making, at least in the public space, has been that this is one of their key priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. Kathy, I think I should be cautious. I'm not going to say that there's an intentional desire to bungle this. I don't have the evidence of that being the case. But I think what I can point to is that what the NPA is dealing with on the other side of the table in the UAE is a fundamentally, if you like, an abnormal society, right? It's a non-democratic society. The rule of law doesn't prevail. There is no independent judiciary. That's been established through a UN Commission on the Independence of the Judiciary. The last report, which was issued some years ago, indicated very clearly that the executive makes all the decisions. The judges simply don't in the UAE, Kathy. And so I think the argument that we're making is you can't go in if one likes Minister Lamola and others are arguing and it's all going to be fine and we've got what looks like a good case. They are in for the legal fight of their lives in the UAE, because on the one hand we have the I think on the one hand we have a relatively potentially a weak legal team that we are sending over. Secondly, we're dealing with a state that may have its own ulterior motives as to whether it will even allow the Guptas to be released. The point we're also making is that the UAE has suddenly sprung into action to ensure the arrest of the Guptas. Although Guptas have resided there for many years, have used the architecture of the banks and other firms in the UAE as part of their global money laundering network. And a big reason for that, we believe, Kathy, is that the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, was placed on a grey list by the Financial Action Task Force. So that's the world's global anti-money laundering body. And they basically said that Dubai has become a haven, which we've known for some years, of dirty money. A lot of it is blood money from wars and other conflicts, and they better clean up the act. And so we believe what might be happening is that they're offering up the Guptas as an opportunity to do so. They may also be calculating that they've seen the NPA just not get a lot of big cases right over the last couple of years. And so they may very well bungle this case in any event, and therefore they will not have to actually give the Guptas over to the South Africans. And I think that is a very cynical calculation, but we've seen that the UAE is a country, I think, that operates in a way that authoritarian regimes do. They're looking to polish the image at the same time while continuing with very anti-democratic practices in their own countries. And so, again, we're not dealing with any normal country as a partner in this extradition process.
Open Secrets Director Henny van Vieren, thanks for your insights there tonight.